Okay, let's get started. So I'm Sarah Wilson. I know I've met a few of you before, but welcome anybody who hasn't been on these calls before. It's so lovely to welcome you and invite you in to find out a little bit more about life coaching and our school and what we do. Today I'm really excited because we have got Ruth Lester with us. Ruth is the co-founder of Life Coaching New Zealand. She started Life Coaching New Zealand with her husband Ed many years ago and has been an integral part of that ever since. So I thought today we'd get to know her journey and what life coaching really means to her. So welcome, Ruth.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I've been watching a lot of your YouTube videos, Sarah, over the last few months, and it's yay. I'm very excited that I've got my opportunity to be here.
Yay. Well, it's so lovely to have you. I've known Ruth for a little while now, quite a long time really. It seems like just a blink of an eye, but if I look back at the time that we spent together, it's actually quite a few years now.
It is.
And this is a really lovely opportunity for me to find out kind of, we've hung out socially and we've worked together all this time, but I don't think I've really got to ask you some of these deeper questions. So it'd be really nice to find out a bit more about your journey with life coaching. So I guess the first question would be about those kind of light bulb moments for you on your journey. And when was the first experience of coaching for you?
That's a really great question. And I'm from the UK originally, as you've probably gathered. I grew up near Manchester, and my first experience of coaching, and it's interesting because I've only really recognized this as a coaching moment later in my life, when you look back and you go, oh, that's what that was. And it was when I was I'd be about 17. I was in sixth form at school, which is about year 12, early year 13 here. And I was, I went to a private girls' school. I was pretty academic, but I didn't really have much of a clue about what I was going to do next. So when you ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which is actually a question I absolutely hate. I don't think we should be asking kids that, but I never had much of an idea. So there I was kind of pootling along. And then one day my English teacher took me aside and we had a bit of a chit chat and about how things were going. And she was saying, well, I think your English is really coming on now. And then she said to me, have you ever thought about applying to Oxford University? And my immediate reaction was, well, clearly not. No, don't be silly. But in that moment, and from then on, my whole kind of worldview started to change. The way that I saw myself started to change, the way that I thought about my ability and my potential. And as is often the case in life, when somebody presents you with an amazing opportunity or opens a doorway like that, often your first instinct is to kind of scuttle away from it because it feels like that feeling that creates. Yes, it's excitement, but it's also fear. And it's also, well, that's way outside of what I can currently conceive for myself. So, it's that real mixture of this kind of spark going off, but at the same time thinking, oh, I'm not sure that's for me. But anyway, a very long story short, as a result of that conversation, which was really, really brief. I mean, it was 5 minutes. And that sort of sent me off into a whole new different direction. Long story short, I decided, I was going to go for it. And, then obviously there was a period of a few months where there was a lot of hard work involved and I had a lot of help and I had a lot more coaching in order to, to get to that goal. But that to me, really now, as I look back, I'm not going to say how many years ago it was, but a good few years, that really stands out to me as a kind of a pivotal coaching moment. And it changed.
It's a really interesting, because I'm thinking about the courses, you're saying that, and it's funny, some of the slides are popping up into my mind, kind of some of those images and metaphors and things that we kind of carry through. And that idea of the creating more or seeing more potential in your client than they can see themselves. And I get that picture of the bowl over the plant.
Yes.
And that idea of like creating just enough space so it's not too scary, but it's just here. And when they get to that point, then you put on a bigger bowl.
Yeah, and I think it's a wonderful, and she was, everyone I think can think about a really inspirational or enthusiastic teacher who they've had. And I think that's a great example. The more I think about it now, with everything that I've learned about coaching, the more I kind of really appreciate what she did, because she didn't say, I think this is what you should do. She didn't tell me what to do. She said, have you thought about it? So she was introducing a possibility to me, and absolutely seeing more potential than I could see for myself. But everything from that point onwards was I had to make that decision. It was down to me. And I still, the more I think about it now, I've got, my daughter's 16 now, so she's coming up to that age that I was then when I had that experience. And the more I think about it, the more of a gift, really, that I see it as. And she probably wouldn't have described herself as a life coach or a coach. She was a teacher. She was doing her, it was part of her everyday job that she was doing. But just that tiny little conversation had such a powerful impact. And I think that's something that I would, people who've done the life coaching course, people who are watching this, who are perhaps thinking about doing the life coaching course, that is what coaching can be in a nutshell. That's what coaching can do for somebody. It doesn't have to be about sitting down with a paid client in a room one-to-one. A lot of our graduates do that kind of work, and it's amazing, it's wonderful. But these almost fleeting everyday interactions that you have with somebody, you've got that opportunity in that conversation to really make a profound difference to somebody. And to me, that's the beauty of coaching.
I remember when I did the course a long time ago, and that moment of sitting in that energy of being a coach. And I think as soon as you change your mindset around what coaching is and how, you're a coach wherever you go. You're not just a coach when you're working or when you're, officially coaching people, but you take that energy with you, and you can, use wonderful questions with friends, with children, with anybody that you come into contact with, and, allow those conversations to be so much more interesting and provocative and, potentially life-changing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I think for me, one of the big differences, I did the course in 2017. So I did it about 6 years ago now. And I guess my motivations for going on the course were pretty unique in one way, because at that point, I was spending quite a lot of time on the phone talking to potential students about the course and giving them information, answering their questions and finding out what they'd like to do afterwards. And I thought, well, it's about time that I actually really, so I can be really authentic when I'm having these conversations and really valuable. It's about time I went and experienced that for myself. So that was kind of my mindset going into the course. And there was probably a big part of me at that point thinking, well, I'm not really a coach, and I don't really want to be a coach. That's not really why I'm here. But what was really interesting was how that my mindset really shifted during the week, and how I kind of came to again, it was one of those moments where I came to see myself in a very different light, because I was having conversations with people, and I was seeing and understanding a lot more about the impact that I could have with people. So even though I was thinking, well, I'm on the phone with people and I'm talking to them about the course and I'm encouraging them to sign up, I suddenly started to reframe a lot of that as, well, actually that in itself, that's coaching. That is having an impact on people. It's helping people to make a decision. Maybe it's not the right time for them. Maybe it is the right time for them. Some people decide very quickly that it's what they want to do. Other people, it takes longer, and there's a bit more going on about that decision and about helping them to move forward. So it was really through that experience that I think my whole mindset really shifted into one of coaching and seeing those opportunities everywhere.
Yeah, and so when you are on the phone to potential students, it's coaching those people through, is this the right thing for you? And the questioning that comes with that. Also, can you tell us, you talked a little bit about, your experience on the course. Were there any particular other light bulb moments that you had as you experienced those 5 days?
Yeah, a couple spring to mind. I mean, one of the things that obviously that the course is kind of based on in terms of its underlying philosophy is about strengths, people understanding what their own strengths and gifts and talents are, and then also then helping other people to go through that process. And it's what really kind of came into my mind was how when you are kind of going through these sorts of processes by yourself, when you're thinking about what your strengths may be, a lot of people who are thinking about coming on this course, who are on this kind of a journey, love reading books, they love listening to podcasts, they love watching YouTube videos, and there's so much that you can learn about yourself and about strengths in general. But what really struck me was how often our own strengths can really hide from us. We often are not aware of them, because when we're quite good at something, it feels very natural, it feels very easy, it's no big deal, right? And on the course it's quite early in the week, I was having a chat with a lovely lady called Brenda. And Brenda was a little bit more, she was a bit of a more mature lady. She was very quiet and unassuming, very, very intelligent, very deep thinking, but not one of those people who was the loudest voice in the room. And we were having a bit of a chat. I think the goal of this particular exercise was to find out something really, really interesting about the other person. And so I was having a chat with her and about things that she'd done in her life. And she told me very casually that when she was younger, she and her husband at the time had built their own boat and sailed it around the world, just the two of them. And she said this in a very offhand way, like she was talking about going out to buy a pint of milk or something. But for me, I was completely blown away by this, because here's the thing about me, I don't do crazy stuff like sailing or climbing mountains or going on adventures like that, but I love reading about them and I love watching documentaries and movies about them. So for me, this was just absolutely fascinating, and I thought this was incredible. And I was like, well, how on earth did you do that? Tell me. And yeah, that was our time up, unfortunately, but it was a really powerful example to me of how often we can achieve quite amazing things in our life and have all these really, really these key strengths and these qualities, but we're not actually aware of them ourselves. And so the lovely thing about being in that 5-day life coaching course environment is you've got all of these other people around you who you can interact with, who can give you feedback, who can help you identify what you're great at. They can give you their perspective on it. And so that's certainly what happened when I was having that chat with Brenda. I was like, well, come on, there's some juice there. We've got to dig a bit deeper and find out what was it about you that that meant you could have that experience.
Yeah, it's so interesting. As you're saying that, I'm remembering some of the wonderful people that I met on the course as well. I met an amazing guy who did Guinness World Records every year. Amazing, and does it for charity and does something funny every year, and just so good. But I was just going to say, as you went through the course, that was a lovely thing you noticed about Brenda. What was it that you noticed about yourself, or that you came to an awareness of your own, and Ed calls it source code?
That's right.
Which is kind of, how would you describe source code?
That's a really great question. And I guess in one way it's kind of our term, or Ed's term that he coined many, many years ago. And it comes from this idea of, it comes from programming and computing. So, when you look at your computer screen, you're seeing, you're seeing images, you're seeing text, you're seeing this kind of visual layout in front of you. Well, sitting behind all of that is the source code. So it's all the programming that goes into creating what you're seeing on the screen. And the source code is a little bit like it's kind of like our DNA. It's our innate instinctual strengths and MO, our modus operandi, that the way that we are when we're at our best, when we're free to be ourselves, and when we're kind of in flow, I guess. So it's a combination of your strengths, your gifts, your talents, your passions. But yeah, we kind of encapsulate it and call it source code.
So as you were kind of going through that those 5 days, what elements of your source code kind of bubbled to the surface that you were like, oh, that's right, I love that one?
I think, I'm certainly thinking in terms of coaching, very much that I'm very, my kind of curiosity, if you like, that I love learning. I love finding out about people. I think we're going to talk about the Colby Index in a minute, which is one of many different indexes and instruments that you can use to actually find out more about your strengths and analyze them. But I'm a bit of a fact finder, so I do love to draw people out with questions and just kind of delve in and work out what's going on under the surface. And just as a complete sidebar, it's really interesting when I think about my kind of professional life and career prior to setting up the life coaching course with Ed. Probably for about 10 years or so, I worked in HR and recruitment, which on the face of it seems very, very different to the work that I'm doing now. But when I think about it, the parts of the jobs that I loved the most was recruitment. So I would do a lot of internal recruitment with my HR hat on. And some of those roles involved a lot of interviewing, strategic interviewing of new candidates. At one point, I was involved in setting up assessment centres, which is to recruit senior managers and leaders. And actually, there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of commonality there between coaching and between how I'm using it now in my professional life and what I was doing when I was working in HR. And again, at the time, if I saw that I had some recruitment in my day, if I knew that I was going to be interviewing somebody, I would just feel like I would really look forward to that. It would really light me up. Whereas some of the other parts of the HR job, employment relations and managing those thorny issues there, that they would certainly not have that same effect. So, lots and lots of different ways that you can identify your strengths and your source code. That's a really good example. Often it's kind of what lights me up, what's giving me that energy spark, what am I looking forward to doing, and what am I not. Sorry Sarah, I've wandered off.
No, it's all right. I think no, it's really useful. It brings to mind that whole idea of the golden thread running through your life, and those moments that really do light you up. And they might not be anything to do with work. They may be just being out in nature, or they may be just anything that adds to your life becomes kind of part of your source code. And it's almost like it's all mashed together, and it's how when you're at your best, and as you say, when you're in flow and you're feeling amazing, then you bring your best out. And so coaching is really about helping people to find their own source code, and live in that energy, which I think is such a wonderful, wonderful way to, have an impact on the world. Imagine if everybody in the world
really is. I mean, even going,
using their perfect, innate, wonderful energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does make life a lot easier, because it makes it easier for you to, and here's the thing, we're not very good, I think, perhaps in New Zealand or generally, perhaps maybe as women as well, I'm not always very good at blowing our own trumpet. And I think perhaps for some of us, the way that we're brought up, often we're encouraged to perhaps to not, it's seen as perhaps being arrogant or being a tall poppy, or somehow where we're often, it's more about downplaying and being humble. And it's really interesting. We were having a conversation around the dinner table the other day, and my son was saying, well, humility is really, really important. And we were kind of trying to coach him from the point of view, well, absolutely, nobody wants to be a big head. But at the same time, if you don't shine your own light, if you don't own what you're good at, and you don't know what it is, and you don't kind of say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I can do, then that is actually going to probably be a bit of an obstacle in life. And it not only helps you to understand what you do want to do, it also is really helpful in telling you what you don't want to do. Where do you not want to spend your time? We talked earlier, Sarah, about how I was part of creating the life coaching course, and many years ago, 10 years ago, when we first started, it was me and it was Ed, and there was just the two of us. So I was wearing a lot of different hats. I was doing a lot of stuff And over the 10 years, I've probably done, other than actually deliver the course, I've probably done a little bit of everything. And sometimes you do that out of necessity. But over the years, what's been lovely is as it's grown, is I've been able to actually identify the areas where, hey, look, I'm not going to be using my source code if I am doing that particular thing. Whereas if I'm spending time talking with people, finding out about them, drawing them out, that's what I love doing, and that's really where I should be spending my time. So it helps you to be more productive. It helps you to spend your time wisely, and yeah, it helps you to communicate a lot better, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. It reminded me of a story that Ed told about Tiger Woods and how he wasn't very good at bunker shots, and he was saying to his caddy, I really think I should practice these bunker shots because I'm really rubbish at them. And he said, no, I don't want you to practice them at all. You're never going to have to practice them, because I want you to practice what you're really good at, and then you're never going to go in the bunker.
Right, I remember that story. Yeah, he said you're just going to get so good at driving and getting on the green that you'll never have to get out of a bunker again, which is, yeah, and I think that's a really, really, yeah, I mean, a really great point. And I mean, it might be a good opportunity now, Sarah, to talk a little bit about the Colby A Index.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about that, because what you do really is very focused on bringing out people's strengths, finding out more about them, and whether life coaching is going to be a good fit for them. And so quite recently you did the Colby training. Tell us a little bit more about that and what it is.
So the Colby A Index is an instrument which helps people to identify what's called their striving instincts. So it's about who they are when they're being themselves, when they're at their best, and it's about how you initiate action. So if you had a creative problem that you needed to solve, it's how you would kind of go about doing that. So I will show you this little bar chart here. This is mine, if you can see it. There we go.
Yes,
so it's got kind of 4 different colors in it, and each one of those represents a different what's called action mode, or a different kind of area. And the idea is that across those different action modes, you get a score, but the score, it's not so much a kind of a score out of 10. It's more about identifying where you are in terms of one of those 12 strength zones. So as with our life coaching course in Colby, there's no weaknesses, there's no weaknesses. It's just where you sit on that spectrum of strengths, basically. And it's a really, that there are other instruments that help you to kind of identify your strengths, which people on the call may have heard of. We've got Strengths Finder, which is Gallup Strengths. I've got the book again here, which I will try and hold up. There we go. And they're all really great at kind of helping you to work out what is your MO, who are you when you are at your best. So for mine, for example, one of the things that I'm quite strong at is called the fact finder. So in Colby, this is how you gather and process information. And it goes on this spectrum from at one end being very broad, big picture kind of stuff. And then at the other end of the spectrum, it's about being very specific, very detailed, very accurate. So I score a 7 on that spectrum. So if you're sitting between 7 and 10, that tells you that if you're engaged in taking action, if you've got a score between 7 and 10, that's where you're going to initiate that action. So for me, if I was presented with a challenge or a problem in a professional context, my initial way of tackling it is going to be to go and start researching it, to go and get the facts, to get the data, basically. Somebody else, and I'll give my husband Ed as an example, he's at the other end of that spectrum. So he is very much big picture, broad strokes. And he doesn't need to know the nitty gritty. He just wants to have a top line figure to base his decision making on. And just knowing that, just having that kind of overview is really fabulous, not just for myself, because it tells me that, okay, I need the detail. I need to know exactly what's going on. But I also need to know when to stop. I need to know when enough is enough, because otherwise it'll be paralysis by analysis and I'll never actually do anything with it. But it's also really great when I'm communicating with him, because if he asks me to give him a figure off the top of my head, what drives me absolutely crazy, because I can't do that, because I need to know that it's right, and I need to know that it's based on all the facts. But equally, when I'm talking to him, when I'm communicating with him, I need to be aware that he doesn't need 110% of the information. He needs 60 or 70, and then he's done. You know, he's tuned out after that. So, and that's just one tiny example of how knowing more about your strengths is so valuable in terms of what you can get done, and then how you relate to other people around you.
You make a really good point. I think, you know, our strengths are double-edged swords. They are in one direction fabulous, wonderful things, but if we use them in the negative, or they go into that negative space, they can be quite a hindrance to us. And really, you know, that self-knowledge about how you work best, and, you know, when that, you know, for example, with me, I've got an amazing imagination. I use it with my hypnotherapy. I do a lot of art, and that kind of internal beautiful landscape that I have is fabulous. It often means, though, that when I'm talking to someone, I'll just zone out and because my mind's doing something in the background. So there's this you know, balance between using it as a strength and also recognizing when it is a weakness. When, you know, it needs shoring up.
Exactly. And it's you know, we really try really hard not to talk about weaknesses. I know when I did my Colby consultant training, which was earlier this year, and it was quite interesting because they're based in Arizona, so it was all of the training sessions were on US time, and it was a 3:30 start in the morning, which was a bit of a challenge. But at the end of each day, they kind of give you a bit of a quiz just to check that the learning's going in. And on day one, I think one of the questions was something to do with weaknesses. And it was a trick question because there are no weaknesses in Colby, basically. Just like there's no, you know, it's called an index. It's not called a test. There's no right or wrong. Whatever your result is absolutely perfect for you. But absolutely, you know, if you do, and we talk about this on the 5-day life coaching course when we're talking about our coaching hats, right? So I discovered that I've got quite a bit of the cheerleader about me, or I've also got I wear the drawing out analytical coach hat quite a lot as well. But if I wear either of those for you know, for too much, if I just wear that, then I'm going to just keep asking people's questions. I'm going to be digging down, but I'm going to get loads of information out, but I'm never actually going to move on and do anything else with it. So it's exactly the same principle with your strengths. It's, you know, it's knowing when to deploy them, I guess, and, you know, knowing when you need to shore them up with something else or with somebody else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that idea of the coaching hats and what kind of energy we're sitting in when we're coaching is really important. You know, and what kind of techniques and tools we can use in that moment, you know, in response to the unique person that's sitting in front of us, because there's no one size fits all coaching technique. You can't, you know, there are so many coaching books that kind of go, do this. I'm like, no, you can't just do this, because every single person that you have in front of you is completely unique and different. So you have to have a massive toolbox of different things that you learn over the years and you add to it. And I think that's what I got out of doing the coaching course in the beginning, was the beginning of that coaching toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. And I spend a lot of my professional life, as we talked about, having conversations with people who are thinking about doing the course, or who are just perhaps new to the world of life coaching and want to know more about it. And one of the common threads I find with a lot of people is that they love helping people, they love learning, and oftentimes it's about, people want structure. They want to know, well, I want to know I'm doing it the right way. I want to know that I'm saying the right things. And I totally understand where those questions come from, because people want the confidence to be able to actually go out there and help people. But the way you get that confidence, it's not necessarily by being given a set of rules that work in every situation, or by being given an off-the-shelf kind of, you know, we'll do these 5 sessions or ask these 5 questions, because you're absolutely right, Sarah, that is not going to work every time for every single person. So while there are certainly do's and don'ts, there are certainly best practices. There are certainly loads of tools and techniques and exercises and concepts that you can learn and that we will absolutely teach you. The key thing, I think, is about developing the confidence to be able to use those in a whole host of different situations, regardless of what that person is bringing with them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that when I look at the most successful coaches that we've trained, or that I know, they are constantly practicing. You know, they get together in groups. They have that kind of professional development going on, where they'll, you know, just on our Facebook page, we might have people get together and just have a practice session together. And so it's that constant practice that propels you into that feeling of confidence, and
that's
just
right. Yeah. But it's also, I guess the other part of that equation is, as a coach, yes, you've got your toolkit and you've got all of your everything in there, but also as a coach yourself, it's about knowing your own strengths. It's about knowing which coaching hats you're going to wear most naturally. And just for people who haven't experienced the 5-day course yet, coaching hats is our big focus on day one, on Monday, and it's all about gaining an awareness and an understanding of all the different ways there are to coach. So it's kind of like coaching styles, but we call them hats, and we give each one a funny little picture. And there are so many different kinds of coaching hat that you can wear. You can be a storyteller, you can be a cheerleader, which we've talked about, which is where you are encouraging and uplifting other people. You can be the drawing out coach, which is lots and lots of questions, really being a bit of a detective. You can be an analytical coach. You can be a very empathetic, caring, listening coach. You can be an intuitive coach, where you're really just kind of going with whatever your gut or your intuition is telling you to go with. And there's pretty much a limitless list. That it's not meant to put you in a box. Quite the opposite. It's to encourage you to start to develop this awareness of, as a coach, that's my natural kind of hat, that's my natural MO. But hey, there are going to be situations where you're going to be pulling in some of these other things. You've got your, as we've had a couple of comments in here, Karen and Andrew have both said, it's the balancing act, right? If you're just wearing one hat, if you're just working in one of your strengths and not using the others, then you're only going to get a partial result. So it's just a great opportunity to really bring it all together, put it into practice, and by the end of the 5 days, hopefully what people are starting to see is that they're really understanding how it does all pull together, and building their confidence to go and use these tools in a way that's really authentic for them.
Absolutely. For you, Ruth, doing the course yourself, we talked about, before we got on the call, we talked a little bit about that before and after, and how things are so different once you've done it. Is a life-changing course. Things, your perception of the world, your mindset changes. Can you tell us a little bit about your before and after, and I guess the biggest aha moment that you had after that?
Yes, and it's really interesting, because I would say that there are some things that kind of go off like that during the course, and then there's a whole host of other stuff that sort of filters in gradually as you look back and reflect on it as well. And you start to see those patterns emerge. And I think for me, one of the biggest change that I saw straight away was, I think first of all, was just getting that real understanding of coaching's everywhere. Right, everything is an opportunity to coach. And I'd been seeing my husband do this for years, actually, and I never realized what he was up to. But we used to get in a taxi, and it would be like a 5-minute, 10-minute taxi ride or Uber journey. And as soon as we get in the car, he would be talking to the driver. He'd be asking them questions. He would be finding out a little bit about them, and probably getting a story in, because he's a storyteller coach. So that by the time we got out of the car, a few minutes later, that person would be, probably hasn't changed their life, but probably feeling a little bit better about their day or about themselves, or thinking about something in a different way, or hey, someone's actually been sitting in the back of my car taking an interest in me and asking me about myself, and that makes me feel kind of really, really good. So those little micro coaching moments, just that they're everywhere, and they're really powerful, and never underestimate that kind of the ability that you've got to affect somebody in that way. For me, I guess one of the biggest light bulbs for me was when I got home. My children at the time were, 3, which is very, very little, 3, 7 and 10. So and before the course, I would say they'd come to me with their, as children do, their problems, their dramas, their questions. And I'd usually go into parent mode and I would say, well, I think you should do this or that or the other. And yeah, sometimes they'd listen, and most of the time they probably wouldn't, or it wouldn't really pan out very well. Whereas after the course, and now, I will ask them a question back. You know, I'll reframe it. If something goes wrong, I'll always ask them what they've learned. If they come to me with something and they sort of, I feel like they want me to, you know, give them the steer on what they should do, I'll just frame it as questions. Sometimes with my middle son, he's like me, he's a fact finder, but to the nth degree. And he's very literal sometimes, and he's not always very good with his emotions. What I'll often do with him is I'll tell him a story, or an anecdote, or I'll give him a metaphor, and it drives him mad because he's so literal and black and white, and he just wants to be told what the answer is. But I won't do that. I'll go down the storytelling route, and then it really annoys him at the time. But he's also very bright, so you know, he'll go and think about it, and then he'll come back and something will have occurred to him. And if it doesn't, well, you know, done my best as a coach. So I think those were kind of some really big changes. The other major change, when I went into the course, I was probably in the back of my mind thinking, is what I'm doing really my purpose? And I know that this is a question that a lot of people have got when they do the course. Some people don't know what it is, and that's what they want to go and get some progress on. For me, it was kind of like, is what I'm doing, is it my thing? Is it what I'm meant to be doing? And I had another coaching session with another lady, lovely lady, very, very spiritual. She'd also had quite a tough life, I think it's fair to say. But in spite of that, she was so resilient, so positive. She was so kind of very generous with her kind of her spiritual gift. And we were having a conversation, and she sort of just basically said to me that when we'd had our chat, you know, the chat that made her decide that she wanted to come on the course, that had been a big turning point for her, and that everything that I'd been telling her and the way that I'd been talking to her had, I guess, kind of inspired her. And she'd really sort of she was thinking to herself, I wish I could be like that. I wish I could model myself on to be like that. And it's quite hard for me to say that, going back to that thing about not wanting to blow our own trumpet. But in that moment, I was like, my God, what I'm doing is actually really worthwhile. It is really, really valuable. And that's why this person's in this room having these breakthroughs and learning all this stuff.
Lovely.
So that was,
and I guess, you know, that's one example of one person that, you know, has had that, you know, you've had that effect on them. But there'll be hundreds of people out there that you never get that feedback. You never get that.
Absolutely.
You know, there's only these one, you know, now and again you'll get one person who'll give you that lovely feedback. But
yeah,
to know that, you know, and I think going into all of your calls with that intention that you want them to become their best selves, and to, you know, give the world their best gifts and strengths and all of those things. I think that intention alone has its own ripple effect.
Yeah. And that's the mindset that I take into all of those calls now. It's like, regardless of what happens, sometimes it's brilliant. Someone's just raring to go. They want to do the course and it all just falls into place at the end. And it's, you know, that's amazing. Sometimes I'll have those calls and people, it's not the right time for them for whatever reason. But it might be in the future. At other times I'll have a conversation with somebody and, you know, I may never hear from them again. They may go off in a different direction, and that's fine too, as long as I have left them in, you know, a better place than when we started the call. As long as they've taken something of value from it, then that's you know, that's really important to me. And often, you know, I'll have those conversations with people, and sometimes, you know, I could be feeling a bit tired myself, or I could be, maybe my day's not going that well, or maybe I've got to rush off after it. But I can tell you what, after I've talked to somebody and it has clicked, regardless of the outcome, that always leaves me feeling in a completely different energy space. It leaves me feeling uplifted. It rewards me. And I think that is, again, something that people who have this desire to help other people that's one of the amazing things about coaching, is it's a two-way street. Right? When you are talking to other people, you're getting that fulfillment and that satisfaction back when you know you've helped somebody. And the other you're always learning more about yourself as well, you know.
Yeah,
it goes both
clients
ways.
often will hold up a mirror and we kind of can see our own you know, development and changes, and those things are, it's a lovely, as you say, two-way street. It's not, you know, it's not giving, it's,
Yeah,
you know, you give and then it comes back almost like
yeah,
times three sometimes.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
I love that idea of that intention of going into, you know, those calls, but I think we can do that on a, you know, an everyday way. In every conversation we go into, every interaction we go into, if our intention is to leave the person in a more positive space than when we met them,
Yeah,
then, you know, isn't that a wonderful way to go through life?
absolutely, it is. And I think it's another really good reason why a lot of people, sometimes when I'll talk to them, they'll be like, well, I know I want to do this, I'm really passionate about it, I want to do it, but I'm gonna wait. I'm busy at the moment. I've got this going on. I've just started a new job, or I've just moved house, or I've got Christmas coming up, or I'm going to do it next year. I'm going to do it when X, Y, Z falls into place. And I always feel it makes me really sad because because for me, coaching isn't about, it's about those moments, and you can be having those moments now. You need to be having those moments now. I understand that for some people, they've got other commitments, they've got a job, and they may not be ready to perhaps become a professional life coach for a few months or even a couple of years, because, you know, you've got to transition out of what you're currently doing, and, you know, there's certain things that you need to put in place before you can start seeing clients. But I hope, you know, what we've been talking about today has made people understand that you don't have to wait until you're sitting down with a client, or until you've got your website, until you've got your office, until you've got XYZ, before you can start learning this stuff and putting it into practice to really make a difference for people. You know, for my English teacher, and it was 30 years ago, if she had, you know, if she'd kind of thought, well, I'm not actually a life coach, so I'm not gonna have this conversation with Ruth until whatever conditions are met, then that would just be so, well, what a shame. You know, what people need people out there helping them and making that difference. And, you know, you alluded to it earlier, we talk a lot in our business, in our training courses, about ripples. So, you know, you were saying, Sarah, that a lot of the conversations that you often have with people, you don't know what the effect is, but there will be an effect, and it will spread out, and it will touch other people. So yeah,
well, it's like these calls, you know, if one thing that you've said has resonated with the people on this call, and each one of them might have taken one different thing out of it, and it just changes the way that you think about something, or the, you know, that ripple affects the people that they come into contact with, affects the people that they come into contact with. So this energy kind of travels out into the universe and does good stuff.
Yeah, so I agree, absolutely.
I don't know if you want to just take a moment to tell us your favorite coaching technique, but
I will share one. And when you asked me to have a think about this, I was, you know, my first reaction was, well, there's just so many. And as a drawing out coach, I love my questions. There is one that we do on the 5-day course, which is our 7 questions exercise, but I don't want to talk about that one, because in case there are people watching this who haven't done the 5-day course yet, the beauty of that particular exercise is that you are what we call hiding the seam. So we don't want to reveal what we're doing when we're asking those questions, because sometimes if you ask them in a kind of a blind way, you get more than if people are consciously thinking, oh, well, this is what this question is meant to elicit, therefore I'm going to overthink the answer. So not going to talk about that one. But one of the ones that we do on the course is our source code exercise, which we also refer to as our successes and disappointments exercise, which is a very long and cumbersome way of describing it. But basically, this is where we reflect back over our life and we identify some of our major successes and disappointments. And when we're saying disappointments, we're choosing the language really carefully. We're not saying failures, we're not saying mistakes. We're talking about things that could have gone better, right? Because we want to use them as learning opportunities. And when we do this on the course, what we tend to do to make it a bit easier is to chunk it down into decades, basically. So we're going right the way back to childhood. So you're looking at maybe 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., etc. And for each decade, you know, finding a handful of examples of things where things went really, really well. You know, you may have achieved a great goal, had a big success, but also you're looking at the things that maybe didn't pan out quite so well, your disappointments. And really, really important to note there that we're not talking about traumas. We're not talking about, you know, really upsetting emotional things that happened to you that you had no control over. It's really things where you can then ask yourself the question, okay, that went really well. What was it about me that allowed that to happen or that caused that to happen? And then a similar question in terms of the disappointments as well. And the idea with this is that you're kind of, and I love this exercise as an analytical coach, is you're kind of getting the raw data. Okay, so you're looking back and you're finding out what happened then, and how can we then kind of dive into all of those examples and look for patterns, look for connections. So it's on the 5-day course. We do this in pairs. So you've got, as the coach, you are asking the questions and you're drawing the information out to begin with, and then you're going a bit deeper with your client to say, well, you know, and you're not doing the work for the client, obviously. You're trying to get them to see the connections and see those patterns themselves. But the idea is that you've got all these disparate events that happened, some good, some bad, and then underlying them all, as you chunk further and further down, you're going to get to some, you know, you're going to get to those strengths, you're going to get to those qualities, you're going to get to those things about you that are kind of in common across the board. And then obviously the second part of that is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? How are you going to use that going forwards if you've got a current challenge or goal or aspiration that you want to achieve? So that is a very, very quick overview.
It's a really, really well kind of described, though. I think everyone could really understand how you could use that, and even just a part of it, you know, even just asking a client about, you know, a success that they've had and a disappointment that they've had, and whatever comes to mind first will often be related to what they've come to you about, or what's top of their mind. So really, really useful. Thank you.
It's a lovely one to do as a coaching session, because another thing that people will often say is, well, you know, do you help us with session planning and how to structure a session? That is just one example of very many that you do on the 5-day course. That in itself, that would give you fodder for maybe not just one client session. You could, you know, you can run with that one. And the other thing is, it's not one and done either. It's a lovely exercise to do. You know, that's kind of doing it on a very broad scale, looking back over your whole life, but you can also do it on a slightly smaller scale. So at the end of each year, for example, if you wanted to set goals for your next year, you could sort of do a mini review of the past 12 months and ask yourself the same questions. What's gone well for me this year? What's not gone well for me this year?
You can even do it on a micro basis, on a daily, you know, at the end of the day, what was a success today? What was a disappointment? What would I have done differently if I'd had the knowledge that I've got now?
Yes, absolutely. And I will just comment for people who perhaps either haven't done the 5-day course yet, maybe you're waiting to do it, or you've done it but you want a refresher. In our online resources in the student membership portal, you've got Ed's course, 10 weeks to a confident and fulfilling life. Now, I think I'm right in saying that week 4 is called source code, and in that week he's basically done a recording of with a real person on the call, taking somebody through that process in real time. So if you want a refresher, if you want a demonstration, because I know a lot of people are always really, really keen and always asking for demonstrations of sessions, that's a really good one to go and revisit.
Yeah, good point. I need to get back and dive into that, and remember doing it all at the beginning, but you know, to come back to it now a few years down the track and re-experience some of those things, it would be really, really useful. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ruth. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to know more about you and your journey, and sharing some of those stories. Thank you, everybody that have come this morning and taken some of this information on board. If you do have any questions, feel free to stick around for a little bit. I'm sure Ruth is happy to answer any questions that people have. Otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. And hopefully I will see you again next week. These are happening every Wednesday, these breakthrough life coaching sessions, every Wednesday, usually at 10 o'clock, but sometimes they may be a wee bit later. Watch out for the emails and on our Facebook page, because I know that there is one that's going to be on a Friday. So yeah, just keep your awareness around, and we'll be using the same link each week. So I look forward to, you know, having a lot more of these lovely conversations and meeting some more amazing coaches. Thank you so much.
Bye for now. See you later.
I hope you enjoyed that video. If you'd like to find out more about professional life coaching training so that you can discover your true path and learn transformational tools and techniques, then click on the link below or go to nzlifecoaching.com/transformation.